so we can maximize the time we have together today. So with that, it is my privilege to turn the time over to Mary Beth Vogel Ferguson, Kara Patton, and Sarah Shea from the University of Utah Social Research Institutes.
Thank you so much, Joey, and welcome everyone. It's so good to be able to be here. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you as we kick off our first quarterly ACES Learning Collaborative. We hope that it'll be a good time of maybe learning a few new ideas, sharing some exciting resources, connecting with each other. And that's kind of the nature of a learning collaborative, right? We learn together. So we get to spend some time in smaller settings, talking with each other and sharing ideas, stories, and encouragement about our work. I'm going to take a moment here to share our screen and get us going. So today we're going to be sharing some thoughts on striving and thriving in 2021 and beyond. And what a challenging time it's been. Striving to carry out our organizational missions, to be responsive to those we lead and serve, and to manage our own personal lives in the midst of all that's happened over the past year. Was anyone else really ready to put 2020 in the rearview mirror? And if there was ever a need for a time machine to travel forward, it's definitely now. Did anything in 2020 turn out the way that you hoped for? And if 2020 was a drink, what would it be? Oh, right. Does it seem like the unprecedented events are lining up one after another? And just ask the kids, school is never going to be the same. And for those of us working from afar, the workday has certainly changed. Waking up to Zoom alerts, trying to grab a bite of lunch, and I don't know about you, but I am getting really tired of looking at myself all day long in Zoom meetings. And worse, forgetting to put on mute before I spout off about everything. For me, humor is one of my go-to coping strategies, and it's valuable for us to realize that when we're using our coping strategies to stay sane, it's because there's something really challenging going on for us to cope with. And the past year has definitely brought it about that. And as we think about the past year and the impact that it's had, I think it's helpful to start with reflecting on how it has impacted us personally. It gives us perspective, maybe another lens to see things. So I'm going to ask you, if you're doing your email or texting a friend, maybe just put that down for a second. I'm going to ask you to take out a piece of paper and a pencil or some way to jot down ideas. And I'm going to give you 1 minute, literally 60 seconds, to just stop and think. What has the past year been like for you? Write down these things and we're going to use them later. So 60 seconds, ready, set, go. You likely came up with more than 3 things, but that's good for now. When you think about these things that have been stressful in the past year, notice what comes up for you when you think about these events. What emotions are there? What do you kind of notice in your body? Does your breathing change? Maybe your stomach locks up. Sometimes it's kind of hard to identify what happens in our body. All these responses you might be experiencing can be referred to as a stress response. In light of these challenges, sometimes we can wonder, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do what I'm supposed to do? Much of it has to do with that stress response. And it's important to remember that a stress response is a normal response to abnormal events. It's to be expected when we're experiencing things like that feel big, that feel overwhelming, when we feel out of control. And it can be what we feel if, for example, we run into this guy. What we are experiencing is a response which is key to our continued existence as a human race. It's our survival instinct. This response is something we all have, no matter who we are, our family background, our intelligence, our education. It's just part of being a human being in this universe. And this response is rooted in the human brain. Complex and amazing. We literally are hardwired for survival. So let's do a quick review of Brain Stuff 101. 3 parts of the brain. That reptilian part of the brain that regulates heartbeat, breathing, body temperature. The limbic system, the center of emotion, memory, learning. And the neocortex that fuels our thinking, problem solving, planning. Stressful situations like a health scare or fear of losing a job are experienced in that limbic system and can trigger the flood of stress hormones that produce predictable changes in the brain. This is our survival instinct, often referred to as the fight, flight, or freeze response. That fight, flight, or freeze response occurs when we experience something in which we feel threatened. And when that happens, the alarm bells go off in that limbic system, setting off the fight, flight, or freeze response. When this happens, access to that neocortex, that thinking part of our brain, is cut off literally, and the reptilian or survival instinct takes over. Adrenaline and cortisol flood our body to fuel the muscles so that we can react with strength and energy. We've all heard stories of people displaying super strength to save a loved one. And it works really well if you're running from danger or chasing a child out into the street. But it doesn't work so well if you're trying to navigate a pandemic. So along came 2020. I don't know about you, but it started off to be a pretty good year for me. And then the coronavirus hit. It was a rough few weeks, kids home from school, businesses forced to close, figuring out how to balance work and family in the same space, maybe even wondering if you'd still have a job. And it was rough, but early on, we had hope that by summer, everything would be okay again. And then came the earthquake and the civil unrest, the protests. And then just as we were trying to open up, the hurricane winds came and the virus spiked again. Things were looking grim in the fall. And then, woohoo, the vaccine was released. We were really excited for sure. It was a much needed boost. You know, many of us had been looking to 2021 with great hope, yet questions remained. How would the rollout of the vaccine work? Who could get it and when? There were so many questions. The coming of 2021 was supposed to give us kind of a fresh start, but in reality, Happy New Year? Who knows? And what if it's just more of the same? As opposed to the sudden threats, we now face more chronic, unpredictable stresses and uncertainty, health scares, family issues, missing people we love and depend on for support, and the fear of what's next. It can be overwhelming and exhausting. Our stress responses have been activated over and over and over again. So how can this repeated stress impact us? You know, nearly every part of our life can be impacted by stress, from thinking to work to social functioning, and each person really experiences these stressors in their own way. It can be different depending on how close to home events hit. Did I hear about hundreds of thousands of people dying, or did my grandmother die? Did my neighbor lose their job? Or did I lose my job? And what if I was already experiencing a lot of stressors in my life? I've heard a lot of professionals talk about struggles with focusing and being able to be productive at work while managing all the new demands on their time. Statistics are showing dramatic increases in domestic violence, substance misuse, suicides, child abuse. You've likely seen a lot of these impacts in your work as well. And it makes sense. All of us, to differing degrees, have these alarm bells going off all the time. And if we're not actually being triggered, we're living with a fear that they might go off at any moment. So it's natural that we might sometimes struggle to access that productive, creative thinking brain, and we hunker down in survival mode. So why should we care about this? Why do we want to know more? I believe human resources, that is you, are your agency or organization's greatest asset. I certainly could not have done the work that I've done over the 20 plus years without the 100 plus research assistants that have been part of this work. Turnover and retraining is time consuming and expensive, and engendering loyalty and commitment to our work really goes two ways. You know, this period of wild uncertainty will end, but what can we learn now to set up for an even stronger future? One key is being able to reframe how we interpret what is happening around us. When we see our staff or ourselves struggling with work issues or time management or focus, behaviors different than what we usually know, it's easy just to think, what is wrong with you? Why aren't you, or why aren't I working up to my potential? This is where we need to reframe, to stop and think, what's up? What's happening? Wondering, what might this person be experiencing? What am I going through? Maybe I have young kids at school every day, but I hear rumors that the schools are going to be going on lockdown soon. What will I do with my 6-year-old? Or maybe I have a grandparent in a nursing home, and so many deaths are in this population and I can't even visit them. Maybe my spouse just lost a job and now the whole family's survival rests on my shoulders. And the future is so uncertain. There's talk of a new normal, but what will that look like? Returning to the office will likely mean different things for different people. Maybe it brings out anxiety because I have health issues and I'm worried. Maybe it is a relief because my home space really doesn't work well as a work environment. It's a tough balance, doing our jobs and being aware of and attentive to the stresses faced by our coworkers, by our staff, by ourselves. But there will be an other side of the crisis. We know it. How can I bring my best self to work, to my family, my coworkers, and my clients? How can we acknowledge and make space for the very real challenges we are all facing in their stress responses? Kara's going to share some ideas about this with you.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Okay, we're just gonna switch some things around here. So Mary Beth did a great job of helping us just kind of connect to some of the things that we all might have experienced over the past year or so, and acknowledging, that we working in the helping professions are people helping people, right? So as we're helping others navigate these waves of the past year, we're probably experiencing some of our waves of our own. And so Mary Beth talked about some of our stress responses that we might have experienced over the past year. And we're going to go just a little bit further with that. I'm going to share a couple of tools with all of you that have been very helpful for me in working with other people, but also for myself as I've navigated some of the challenges of the past year. And, there's definitely been some waves. So one of my favorite quotes is from Jon Kabat-Zinn. He developed mindfulness-based stress reduction, and he says, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf." So my biggest goal for my section today, that I want to share with you a couple of the surfboards that I've used over the past year, and in hopes that they're helpful for you too. One of the concepts that I think a lot about is this window of tolerance. And Mary Beth talked a little bit about the different parts of the brain and how those might play a role in our stress responses. This is just another way that I like to conceptualize this. So this is called the window of tolerance, and these are our trauma and/or anxiety-related responses. So in this middle box, you can see the comfort zone. That's when we're emotionally regulated. That little blue banner says we're calm, cool, collected, connected. We have the ability to self-soothe. We can regulate our emotional state, and staying in this window allows for better relationship interactions. That's where we like to live. We're creatures of homeostasis. We like to be in that comfort zone. That's why, we have drive-through Starbucks and seat warmers. We like to be comfortable as people. So things will cause us to go outside of the window of tolerance, and that's where we can really see and feel some of those stress responses. When Mary Beth talked about checking in with our bodies to see where some of those things might be living, or what emotions might have come up for us over the past year. This is kind of maybe part of that, what's going on for us. So in the little green box on the left-hand side, it says things that cause us to go outside of the window of tolerance. Fear. This can be unconscious thoughts or feelings. I don't feel safe. I don't exist. Abandonment or rejection. Sometimes those trauma-related core beliefs about ourselves can be triggered. And in response to that stressor, we either get kicked up into hyperarousal, or we get kicked down into hypoarousal. So some of these behaviors, Mary Beth said, it's very easy for us to look at our staff or ourselves and say, well, what's wrong with you, right? But if we can think about these as, oh, maybe this is an indicator of a stress response for this person, it gives us a different opportunity in how we might respond to others or ourselves. So some of the things that you might see in others this year or experience in yourselves: anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, chaotic responses, outbursts, anger, rigidity. Things have to be, just one certain way. We might find ourselves kind of ruminating different thoughts or behaviors, overeating or restricting. Addiction, substance abuse can go up, impulsivity, right? Down in the bottom, they spelled feigned death response wrong on this chart, but the rest of it's really good, so we're going to give them a pass on that one, right? But thinking about how we might kind of check out sometimes, or not as connected to our emotions, feeling a little bit of that separation, right? These are things that we can recognize other animals do, right? So the saying, playing possum, right? That's really, some of these are a way of trying to protect ourselves. Also to self-soothe back into the comfort zone, but maybe not having as much access to that problem-solving part of our brain in the neocortex. So in the little orange box on the right, it says things that we can do to stay in the window of tolerance. Mindfulness, being present in the here and now, techniques for self-soothing, regulating the body, recognizing those limiting beliefs and challenging them with positive or other options. So one of the things that when I recognize this in either the people that I work with or maybe in myself, what I take it to mean is it's a really good time to take an extra step, to take the first step to kind of try to work to come into the comfort zone, because anything that we do beyond that is going to be much more effective. So just thinking about this applies for the people that we work with, but also with ourselves. So in our helping professions, this balance of life and work has always been somewhat of a challenge, right? There's always more that we can do in our helping professions. But I think that this has become particularly challenging for those of us in this field over the past year. There's more work to do. The things that people are coming to us with are more challenging. So thinking about how do we balance this too? How are we navigating the challenges in our own personal lives and that increased request from our work? Well, this is how I felt at one point over the past year. And this is so true that I'm willing to share this very unflattering photo with 100 people on Zoom. Because, you know, it almost like was that these hits just kept coming, like Mary Beth talked about. We had a pandemic and social unrest and earthquakes and inland typhoons. Like what, you know, there was a period of time where I looked up and I said, the social work gods are playing a joke on me. Right? I called my first clinical supervisor. His name is Fred. He's great. But I said, you know, Fred, I want to check in and see how you're doing, but also I have a bone to pick with you because I think you kind of mailed it in on my clinical supervision. You didn't teach me how to handle any of this stuff, right? Much less all of it at once. So thinking about, you know, these are new challenges for many of us, and they're really unique, and what a combination. So one of the biggest and most important things is that we're able to care for ourselves, because we can't give anything that we don't have, right? I can't give people hope or a sense of connection or a way to kind of steady themselves or ground themselves if those are not things that I have not found access to yet myself, right? So putting on this oxygen mask for ourselves first becomes so important, right? The instructions when we used to be able to get on airplanes and travel for fun or business, right? They would tell us every time, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And I hear from a lot of helping professionals that feels selfish, right? Or that, you know, they need to focus on their work first, but really thinking about this has a huge potential to make our work better or worse. So I'm going to teach you some tools that I have used over the past year or so, and that I teach to others to help kind of center and come back to that space where we're feeling a little bit closer to our comfort zone. So I'd like you to just look at this image of this tree for a moment, right? On this beautiful cliff, the sky, right? Not a bad place to live, I don't think. Right? I don't think that this tree had pandemics or inland cyclones or earthquakes this past year. And thinking about what it might feel like to be this tree. So this next section of the talk, we're going to experience this a little bit and kind of take some time to check in with ourselves and support ourselves. So we move through the rest of the day and week in a way that we feel a little bit more connected. So thinking about that, one of the things that I will like to do, sometimes is visualize being this tree. Sending my roots deep into the earth. Just imagining that. Or sometimes I'll call up someone who feels really nurturing to me. I don't know if you all have heard of Oprah, but I think she's pretty great, right? She has some traits that I think are just very nurturing and caring. Some of the other people in your life, these can be people that you do know or don't know, right? Partners or friends or loved ones, figures from books or movies, maybe spiritual figures. Really, the most important part is to recognize the traits of that person. And think about kind of calling them in or channeling them in and noticing how they make you feel. Particularly in those moments where you recognize needing some of that compassion or loving kindness. These can be figures of wisdom, right? In the helping profession over the past year, we have been playing the long game, right? There has not just been one issue or one challenge that has come up. It has been those kind of continuous waves for us. And I can't think of another person whose long game I respect more than Nelson Mandela's, right? That was a long game. And one of my favorite quotes of his says, "May your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears." So calling in, recognizing those strengths or those supports that we need to serve others and even ourselves, and channeling them, finding what we call a resource that might be available to us and identifying them. Another one that I think about is the hummingbird, right? This amazing little animal flies around the world and shouldn't even actually be able to fly, right? The physics of this little animal, it's amazing, right? So thinking about, those are a couple of spaces that I've needed to channel this year in the work. So thinking about some of those resources that you might need, I want you to identify what that source of strength might be. Then I'm going to invite you all to close your eyes or lower your gaze. If you'd like to turn off your camera to do that, that's fine too. But I want you to just start to bring attention to your breath or a space that feels neutral inside of yourself. And then bring the resource to mind. This can be one of those figures that I introduced earlier. You can borrow one of mine. You can use one of your own. It can be a positive memory, experience, important person or animal. Imagine this resource as well as you can. Hold this image in your mind. Take the time that you need to elicit this information and fill this resource out as much as you need to. Notice as much detail as you can. And when you have a strong sense of the resource, begin to tap either your knees or your shoulders, left to right. Noticing the details and the traits of that resource that you've chosen. Tap 6 to 12 times. Stop and check in with yourself. If it feels good and the resource is strengthening, you can tap more. You can stay with this as long as it feels that it's bringing you some support. If other memories or resources come to mind that feel good, you can incorporate them also. This comes from Laurel Parnell. She's a therapist who developed this resource tapping process. And what she has found in her work is that we can access positive, nurturing feelings internally for ourselves by eliciting that experience in a positive way. And in the tapping, it's almost as if we hit record to say, okay, I'm going to invite this into my space. So thinking about this, just a couple of tools that we can use to start to balance out those stress hormones. I think the best thing that we can do is acknowledge that those have been present for us in the past years helping professions, and respond to those rather than getting into a place where we're reacting to them. So Mary Beth is going to lead us into our first breakout group, and I will turn over to you, Mary Beth.
Thank you, Kara. You can leave the questions up there. That's just perfect. And thank you for, I appreciate just a chance to breathe. That's really helpful. So we are going to take a moment to go into breakout groups. I think you should all, I just put the questions for our breakout sessions in the chat. So each of you individually will need to open the chat and you'll be able to see those questions. With so many people in our session today, we're not going to have facilitators. We figure that between all of the adults in the room, you can figure out how to start sharing with each other. We encourage people, if you've had your camera off and you're able to turn it on just to be able to see each other. That would be helpful. And any questions that you have from the group, if people want to write things in the chat, we'll be able to look at those. Some people may feel more comfortable sharing verbally, other people in chat, whatever works well for you. We'll have about 15 minutes in this session, and then you'll have a 60-second warning when it's time to come back. So you'll be able to take yourself off mute and share in your groups, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes. Okay, and we'll send you to the groups right now.
Okay. I think.
Looks like most people are back.
Hey, people trickling in. And Mary Beth, am I good to just dive in, or I couldn't remember. Are we going to take a moment or two?
Nope, I think you're good.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Shea, and I'm a clinical social worker and a colleague of Mary Beth and Kara's. And I'm really excited to wrap up this afternoon with you all and kind of broaden the conversation, if you will. So I'll leave it at that and share my screen. I think I finally got this down. Is everyone seeing? Great, amazing. Okay, you guys. So Kara and Mary Beth just kind of led us through the beginning of this presentation, and we rounded out the first part with thinking about some tools that focus in on supporting individuals as we navigate kind of the impacts of stress. And, you know, I think diversifying your toolbox in any way is crucial to be able to ride the wave, as Kara said, and, you know, kind of absorb all of the shocks that can come from such, you know, a pervasive, stressful time that we know will continue beyond the pandemic. And so this is the big question that our team is trying to tackle, is how do we scale this type of support to our greater community? So our work is focused on figuring out ways to help organizations and businesses recognize how stress and adversity impacts the experiences that people have when they're interacting with that system. So that question that we're looking at is like, how the heck do we get organizations and systems to ask that, hey, what's up? That question that Mary Beth talked about earlier. And I want you just to take a moment to think to yourself, if you've witnessed this at play within your own work, perhaps an experience with a colleague or a patient, a client or a customer that you noticed or felt was directly impacted by how that person was approached or addressed in your own system. And it could be for better or for worse. And so our goal is to expand the toolbox for how organizations and systems approach caring for and supporting their employees, as well as those coming in through their doors. Although right now it might be coming in through the Zoom window. So how did we get focused on this task at hand? The focus on organizations themselves. How did this start? So for the past several years, members of this team were part of a subcommittee of the Intergenerational Welfare Reform Commission, which was established in 2012 by the Utah legislature to really help address Utahns experiencing intergenerational poverty. So there was a subcommittee that was formed when the commission learned that Utahns who had received public benefits were experiencing a disproportionately high number of adverse experiences as compared to the general population. So the commission recognized that their approach to sustainably addressing intergenerational poverty would have to be targeted to support individuals who may have experienced the impacts of adversity and trauma or adverse childhood experiences. So over the past 4 years, that subcommittee worked to figure out how to best support the thousands of people in our community, as well as the system supporting them to help kind of break this cycle of poverty. And so, one of the biggest and most important steps in tackling any issue is to really make sure that we're looking at it from a comprehensive, big picture view. And so this is our big picture, and it might be for many of you as well. So we're learning, every day more and more about the ways that ACEs impact individuals up the pyramid, but then also those foundational pieces that influence why ACEs happen to people and how they are influenced by our communities and by our systems at large. And so we kind of remind ourselves it's always important just to stay grounded and oriented to every aspect and layer kind of this perspective. And we also at the same time want to stay grounded in the tiered approach that's used within systems to address both intervention and prevention. Many of you may be familiar with this idea of kind of an approach to, universal, targeted, or intensive ways to address these types of problems. And so again, we're just trying to stay grounded in surveying the scene to make sure that we're really thinking about the comprehensive way to address and tackle this problem that was kind of put before this group. And I just have to make a plug, that you guys know this really well. You working in your systems, working in your fields, you do this every single day. You think about comprehensive ways to tackle the issues of your clients and your patients, and even address how to better support your staff and your communities within your organizations. You're kind of like the rock stars. You guys know this. And so we look to you as we think about helping address, and support people across our state, learning to not recreate the wheel because you're already doing this work. So, we had this issue put before us by the Intergenerational Poverty Welfare Reform Commission. And then we've seen this before. 2020 happened, and it happened to this project as well as it happened to all of you too. And so the group quickly realized that addressing the impacts of trauma and supporting systems across our state was so much more than just an intergenerational poverty issue. So it was an issue that was impacting our community on a much larger scale. But like, how do you take on this issue in the middle of a pandemic? Well, our friends at the Department of Health came in and said, we've got an idea. We recognize that this is a public health issue. And you know, what's interesting is that the Department of Health had already recognized that addressing ACEs was so crucial to the health and well-being of our state that they named Joey Thurgood as our state's ACEs prevention coordinator. And so it was just a natural marrying of two projects to allow ourselves to address this issue on a larger scale with more capacity. And so in September of 2020, Trauma Informed Utah was formally birthed in our community as an initiative. And since this time, we have been working on addressing ACEs and supporting our community on a larger scale. And the really cool thing about this initiative is that it is born and bred Utah, for Utahns, by Utahns. And so we're really focused on making sure that the way that we address and tackle these issues is a reflection of what is really going to work within our community. So we have three different ways that we're trying to think about establishing some sort of organization that will help our community address the impacts of stress and adversity on a larger scale. So we have three different kind of tiers, and some of you are participating in this process. And it's really exciting to see you in a different forum. So we have a center development committee, we have a center scope committee, and a center research committee. And each of these groups is responsible for thinking about how to best set this organization up for success. So we have a structure that's going to work within our community. We have a scope that's comprehensive in the way that we're going to address some of these issues right off the bat. And then we have a research committee that knows that we're always going to be turning outwards to best practices across the field of the trauma-informed approach, and always anticipating that there's something new that we need to be thinking about. And so I wanted to share with you all a little bit about kind of what we envision the scope of this center to offer to our community. Many, which many of you may end up utilizing as you think about better supporting both staff and customers and clients within your organizations, because we're starting to really recognize, wait a second, addressing stress and the impacts of adversity within our organizations not only is the human way to do work, but it also makes our work a little more effective. And so we know that some of the scope that we'll look at are just being able to provide information and resources to people doing this work. So, educational opportunities, toolkits for implementation, maybe even screening tools that you could use. We also are thinking about technical assistance. Some of the feedback that subcommittee received early on in the process, in just surveying kind of what are the needs in our community. People want training, people want information that they can come back and share with their organizations. Perhaps we'll even be able to provide some consulting to organizations who may need a little more hands-on assistance initially. but the overarching goal of this center is to be responsive to the expressed needs of the community, which includes you all. And I'll show you at the end kind of how you can start engaging with this center right now before we really kind of get up and rolling. So as I said, 2020 happened to this project too. And so, we were rolling along around our center development kind of process, but we also recognized that there was a need for a crisis response in our community because, Mary Beth and Kara were getting calls saying, hey, our teams need help. We know that you kind of do this work. Can you help us? And so we recognized that, wait, we kind of need the center now. So what can we use as a stopgap? So we found this resource called ACES Connection. And I don't know if some of you are familiar with ACES Connection, but it's basically this nationwide, well, really global networking platform for organizations and individuals and people who are doing this work. And so we created a page on ACES Connection. And so on that page, we started putting resources that you can download. So you can see here, we have different sections for, for professionals or for supervisors. We have resources in Spanish to just kind of help provide information if you're looking for it. There's another way to engage with ACES Connection, which is through a calendar. And so organizations or members can go and put information on the calendar to start, alerting people of like, hey, we're offering this training and it's open to anyone. And we do have members who will actively go on and update the calendar with upcoming trainings and events, and it's a way to just get out the information. So we formed this Trauma-Informed Utah ACES Connection page, but on Tuesday, today's Tuesday, when was it, Monday or Friday of last week, we actually launched the Trauma-Informed Utah web page. And when I say web page, is actually just a landing page. But when you Google Trauma-Informed Utah, this is what comes up. And we're really excited because eventually this will become our website. And we'll basically take what's on ACES Connection and infuse it into a website and then add more and more materials and things as the center kind of comes into fruition. But I'm sharing this with you now. And I think if Mary Beth can put the link into the chat, so you can go to traumainformedutah.org and you can actually sign up for our mailing list. And so as we start to share things with the community, you can ensure that your information, we have your contact information. And so we're going to round out the session with our last breakout session. And, we want to hear from you all kind of how do you see the center maybe supporting you in your work? What would you want the center to help provide for your organization? Maybe are you already doing this work within your organization? And so we're going to wrap up and take the last couple minutes for the breakouts to discuss these questions. And we'll come back and would love to just spend the last time wrapping up and kind of having a report out. So, from the groups. And so if you want to have someone maybe taking notes or who commits to saying, oh yeah, I'll be the person who will kind of speak out to the group or maybe put it in the chat, that would be great. So I'm going to, do you want me to keep the questions up?
We have the questions in the chat now, so everyone will be able to open them there. We're going back into the same group, so you'll know the people that you're going in with. As Sarah said, take notes. We won't have time for everyone to report out, but we want to collect your wisdom. So don't hesitate to put anything you want in the chat as we come back together. So we'll take about 12 minutes or so in the groups. So here we go.
Okay, we're coming back. Welcome again. So I don't know about the rest of you, but we had a really amazing, engaging discussion in our group with a lot of great ideas. So if people want to make comments or notes in the chat, but I think we can also open up the microphone to anyone who wants to kind of report out from your group about a discussion.
I would love to comment, Sarah, if I may.
Yeah.
We discussed how Utah has its specific ACE struggles that it probably faces reoccurring. And it'd be really interesting to learn more about the research on what those specific ones for our community are and how to break stigmas and barriers for those families, so that way they maybe feel more able to reach out for resources or for support. And then also just so we can help raise awareness within our staff and our own programs on what the most occurring things are, how to prevent them, and then what to do if they've already occurred to help reduce or mitigate the impacts throughout the rest of their life.
Yeah. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Sarah, one of the suggestions that came out of our group from one of the gals from Root Kids, I think it was Root Kids, I can't remember the exact name, but she mentioned that she wanted to make sure that there are resources that were age specific, so that if parents have issues, their children are struggling, that they can go to that resource and access videos or games or apps or something that can help children process trauma that they may be experiencing. And so I thought that was a really great recommendation for Trauma Informed Utah to take under consideration.
The upliftfamilies.org website. The Uplift Families is the personal initiative of Jeanette Herbert, former First Lady. And we worked 10 years to create a parent resource on that website, which is age specific and issue specific. So the parents can go in and click on the age of the child, and then is it autism? Is it for school performance? And then immediately get linked into resources. We have over 600 vetted resources on that site that we had mental health professionals look at. So upliftfamilies.org.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Joey, and Abby for jumping in. Other things that stood out from conversations or things that got people excited?
Well, I'll share in my group. One of the individuals talked about the value of the center in being able to be a repository of information that could be used for grant writing, in being able to talk about partners that are available, research, best practices, other research partners in the area, community efforts that are going on. That could be very helpful to small groups looking at maybe wanting to even partner on grants. And I was excited by that. I'd never even thought about that. It was a super idea.
Yeah, it's kind of, people are picking up on it, and it's a hot concept these days, especially with grants and funding.
We had some really good ideas in our group, mostly quizzes that could be added to a website, right? We have the ACEs quiz that tells you about the trauma, but there's also a resiliency quiz that you could find. I'll throw that in the chat. Or there's the VIA character quiz that you can take with your kids to see character traits that your children have. And I'll throw that one in there as well. So we thought that that would be really great for parents to have. And then my organization, Waterford.org, we work with families in the year before their children go to kindergarten. And we do push notifications for families 3 times a week. And every Friday, families get a social emotional push notification, things that they can talk to their children about when it comes to emotional topics. And I think that that resiliency thing, some things on how to build resiliency for parents and children would be a really great topic to add. And with all of that in mind, I would love some form of training at our organization when it comes to ACEs. And I just don't know what that looks like. So offline, I would love to talk to somebody about how we could possibly get that kind of training at our organization with our family coaches. I think that would be awesome.
One thing that our group kind of added to that, the screeners are great, but it's got to go beyond that. And it has to, if we're going to send clients there, then once they take the screening, we've got to give them some resources to deal with what they've just discovered, right? So instead of just saying, yeah, you have a real high ACE score, we're saying these are some of the things, these are the resources you can tap into. This is how you follow up and at least give them something to move through. So we're not just identifying these and then not giving them the resources to support them and their families.
Yeah. Thanks, Teresa. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Joey to close us out for the day, but I'll put my email in the chat and people are welcome to contact us if you have thoughts or questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, ladies. What a wonderful presentation. I know that this was a little bit, I just want to give you a little heads up. This is a little bit different than our future sessions will be, because this really was kind of taking a moment to get in touch with how you're doing before we jump into what we need to do to help others. And so I hope you appreciated an opportunity to just take a moment, process what you've been through over the last year, understand that everybody else is feeling the same things that you are, and that if you feel like you're half doing everything, you're not the only one. Everyone feels the same way. As I mentioned before, these are quarterly convenings. Our next convening won't be a full quarter. It will actually take place let's see, I don't have my calendar up. It will actually happen in March. The date is March 23rd, and March 23rd, let me just double check and make sure I'm saying that right. Yes. March 23rd, we're doing it a little bit earlier than a full quarter, because that session will be on strengthening economic supports for families. And we'll be talking about the earned income tax credit, the importance of the EITC, how you can help get your clients to file for free. We're going to have individuals join us from Connect to Collect with the University of Utah, who are going to talk about a new initiative that they're engaging in to leverage the relationship between healthcare and in order to get taxes, help people get their taxes filed. But we really want to focus on strengthening economic supports for families. So we are doing that a little bit earlier, knowing that tax season ends in April. Of course, who knows? Maybe it's extended. I don't even know. Has anybody heard if it's been extended? It might be. Who knows? But so hopefully you've enjoyed this experience. There will be a brief survey or evaluation that will go out afterwards. If you're interested in receiving a certificate of completion, I've posted a link in the chat so that you can get a certificate. It is not a CEU or a CME, but it will be a certificate that shows that you completed the training. And if you're interested in joining the Utah Coalition for Protecting Childhood, you can email me. I'll put my email in the link. My name is Joey Thurgood, and I am the coordinator for the Utah Coalition for Protecting Childhood, which is chaired by Brent Platt from Department of Human Services, and Deandra Brown, who is a survivor and an amazing community advocate. And so thank you so much, everyone, for your time. If you're interested in joining the coalition, please feel free to send me an email. And you'll be getting a survey shortly. And please remember to visit traumainformedutah.org and sign up for their newsletter and mailings as well. Thank you so much. I know that we're a couple of minutes over. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was as valuable for you as it was for me.